drive the smart.
Let's talk about affordability for a moment. Fortune magazine and CNN came out with an article a couple weeks ago saying that this was the most affordable time in the last 40 years. The affordability index was at an all-time high, meaning the most affordable time in the last 40 years when you take into consideration price and interest rates. Price dropping 28% nationally from peak to trough, and interest rates. Where do you come down on this being the time for somebody to buy and get into the market and cash in on the affordability of today?
I mean, I think now is a perfect time to be in the market. I think what's holding it back, and there's a few things that are holding it back. Prices are low, absolutely. They're off almost 30%, as you said, from where they were at the peak. Interest rates still, even though they've ticked up a little bit, I mean, they're still under 5% for 30 or fixed rate mortgage. When you think about it, now is the perfect time. I think there's the psychology of it right now. There's the media suggesting that prices may go down further, so people might be sitting back thinking, well, now's a good time, but I'll wait for prices to go down even further. You can't time the market that way. That's going to, you're going to miss that if that's what you're trying to do. I think there's a lot of people that would like to buy right now, but they can't buy because they're underwater, because they owe more than their house is worth, and that's unfortunate. There's probably 20-some-odd% of the people who own a home today that couldn't sell if they wanted to because they owe more than the house is worth. And if they do sell it in a short sale, then their credit's damaged and they can't get back in to the market for at least another 3 to 5 years. So I think we've got some other things impacting it. When you look at these kind of interest rates and this kind of affordability, there should be cars lined up at these subdivisions out here. I mean, how many of you have been in the business for just a couple of years? Just 2 or 3 years. Just a few of you. But in the back, it gets better. It will get better. We should all be wearing T-shirts. I survived the housing downturn, the first housing downturn of the 21st century. I think what people forget is this is a cyclical business. And this particular cycle has lasted a little bit longer than any of us would like. But, as long, I've always said, as long as living indoors doesn't go out of style, we've all got jobs. People need a place to live. And I think that if you look at what's going on the commercial side of this business with apartment buildings and vacancy rates in apartments, they're really at all-time lows. There's a lot of people renting today because either they don't have the down payment, they can't qualify, or they wreck their credit. And they need to, so it's going to take a while, but those people, I mean, people don't, when they're kids, don't say, when I grow up and I'm successful, I'm going to rent a house. They want to own something, and I think that will come back. But you're right. It's when you look at it, you say, why isn't it better? I think there's other factors you need to look at it. But clearly, if someone's got the credit and they've got a job and they're looking to buy a home, now is the perfect time to do it.
NAR came out last month and said that 40% of sales nationally, 40%, 4 out of 10 are distressed sales. Where do you come down on the distressed sale market? And the second part of that question is, what about the shadow inventory that we keep hearing about? Is it out there? How big is it? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, I think the distressed sale, a lot of those are short sales. There's a lot of conversation in NAR right now and in Washington, D.C. about forcing banks to respond more quickly on short sales. It's taking way too long for banks to make decisions on short sales. I mean, I've heard stories of 6 months, 8 months, a year. You lose the buyer in the transaction. A lot of people who would like to buy first-time buyers, they're being beaten by investors who are out there buying and paying all cash. And if you're the seller and you're looking at an all-cash offer from an investor or an FHA loan from a first-time buyer, you're probably, even if that cash sale is a lower offer, you're probably going to take that because you want the transaction to get closed. So these are very, very interesting times. But the shadow inventory, I don't think anybody really knows how big that is. I've heard anywhere from 2 million properties to 7 million properties. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. But the reality of it is we'll sell 5.3 million homes this year. in this country. And even if that's optimistic, let's say it's 5 million. I did the math, that's about $80 billion in commissions. And I guess the question we should all ask ourselves is, forget all of that other stuff, how much of that 80 billion do I want to make this year? I mean, that's what you should be thinking. I mean, all these other factors, they're certainly significant and they're in there, but I think if the federal government would get out of the way, if we stop with these moratoriums, if we stop with all of these loan modifications, the numbers on loan modifications do not really work. When you think of the redefault rate, you look at the redefault rate, within 6 months, over 70% of these houses are redefaulting. And I think to me, I find it offensive when you talk to people who are proud of the fact that they've been living in a house for the last 2 years and haven't made a mortgage payment. And they think that's acceptable. I think that's atrocious. And the sad thing is, those same people they don't have first class in the security deposit when they finally get thrown out. And that just tells you that, to me, there's something wrong when people actually think that way. But, again, I think we just have to be positive about the role that we play. There's problems out there. You can solve a lot of those problems, and there's money to be made in this market.
Let's talk about making money. The world obviously has changed since the 04-05 years. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing a real estate agent today in this 2011 market?
I think, looking at this year and beyond, it's staying relevant. How do we stay relevant in a real estate transaction? And just to digress a little bit, as you know, I go to a lot of industry events, Inland, NAR, Real Trends, gathering of, I must go to at least 10 to 12 industry meetings a year, because I look at part of my job is to stay sort of at the forefront of what's going on and what's being discussed. And I got to tell you, 10, 12 years ago, in 1999, 2000, 2001, when I was going to those meetings, all of the tech people, all the tech gurus who were at these meetings were predicting our demise. They all said that we were going to be disintermediated from the transaction. I see some of you shaking your heads. You probably heard those talks. The buyers and sellers wouldn't need us. They'd find everything that they wanted online, and most of it would be free, so they wouldn't need a real estate professional. And they said it was going to happen pretty quickly, in the next 3 to 5 years. So that would have been 2005. Well, the good news is that hasn't happened. Most of the people who were making those predictions moved back with their parents. But seriously, though, you have to ask yourself, is business going to be the same 10 years from now? And how many of you think that the business will be done exactly the same way? I don't think anybody does. And what's happened now is the amount of information that's available to consumers is almost overwhelming. It's out there. And what we need to do is think about what value add do we have in a transaction? What value added services can we provide going forward? So I think this still gets down to a face-to-face, transaction-by-transaction business. A lot of those people making those predictions underestimated how complicated our business is. And I know most of them. They had no idea that there were 1,500 local boards of realtors. How would you know that looking at the business from the outside? They didn't know there were 940 MLSs. And all of the rules and the regulations and the complexity of our business and the transactions, they were sort of overwhelmed by all of that. But we can't rest just saying, well, it didn't happen, it will never happen. We have to look at every transaction that we do, every customer that you're talking with, and keep asking yourself, what value-added services can I be providing to this customer? So not only are they happy with my service, they're referring me and recommending me to their friends and their neighbors and relatives. This is really a person-to-person business. I don't think we're going to see that change in our lifetime, but if we don't adopt new technologies, if we don't adopt social networking, not that's all we do, but that's just part of an overall program, what we will find is real estate professionals will still